Said,
Oh,
now live. We are joined by the amazing Sangeeta Pillai, Soul Sutras. I always get my words and pronunciations totally screwed up, so I apologise. Who's an absolute legend and trailblazer when it comes to giving the voice of South Asian women a platform to explore their sexuality without any shame or judgment, and everything from periods to menopause to sexual harassment and shame and nipple hair and body hair. I'll get to that in a bit. We had a picture taken down on Instagram, which was a very hairy Asian lady, and it didn't show anything. It was just from shoulders down to hips, and it was all body positivity, and that got taken down, which was just ridiculous. So we will cover it all, and the award-winning Masala Podcast, which is amazing and hilarious, and the Masala workshops, and stories, which is amazing because I love stories. I just think that art of storytelling actually is how people remember things and how people can relate. And so, yeah, I just think what you're doing is amazing. But how did you get, what's your background? Like, how did you, I always say there's an anger. Everyone that works in anything to do with sex, there's an anger in there that makes you do what you do. Where did yours come from?
well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on Killing Kittens. I've been such a fan for so many, many years. I think the work you do, Emma, and Killing Kittens does is revolutionary, like in so many levels. So it's such an honor to be
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you for having me. So, yes, there is anger, there is rage, I think. And I think, particularly within South Asian culture, I don't know if you're familiar, but the culture is always about keeping quiet. The culture tells women, South Asian women, to be demure, to be respectful, to let other people speak and other people be the first. So when you are brought up, and I grew up in a very traditional Indian family in Mumbai, like I was the first woman in my family to have a job, which tells you kind of where we come from. So, having grown up in that kind of environment and being taught that the only purpose in my life really was to marry somebody and have kids, and that was it, it didn't matter what I thought or who I was. And I think I was very, very angry from a very young age. I can remember being really, I think I carried this inside me. Say, how can you tell me not to do this? Or how can you say I can't say this or whatever? And I think I have been fighting all my life. And I think it's just now that I have a platform to fight
Yeah,
on.
me too, me too. We just fight.
It's fine. But anger, I think, is again in cultures that do not allow women to be angry. Um, there is an immense kind of cleansing energy, I think, in anger to say, you know what, I'm going to do this and screw you, you know? And also, if you go back to traditional Indian culture, our goddesses are fucking angry. Kali, if she doesn't like what she says, she'll chop your
Now you
head
know
off.
why they're angry. Yeah.
You know, yeah, she'll chop your head off. Simple, So that is also our culture. So I just feel like those elements of the culture have got kind of backed off, and we've got this kind of version of Indian or South Asian culture that has been kind of homogenized and by men, and we are kind of living sort of within the systems that no longer serve us. So sorry, that's a very long answer, but
No,
yeah,
it's a
I'm
good no,
angry.
it's a good answer. And then what made you start? Because you started with a blog, didn't you?
Yes, I
So
did.
was that sort of more of a personal just vent to get it all out on how you were feeling and what you were where you were seeing the problems?
Yeah, so within kind of, so I moved to the UK so about 15 years ago, and whether it was kind of Indian women back in India or South Asian women here, I would keep having the same sort of conversations. It would always be about, but why are we doing this? And why can't we say that? Or why can't I talk about an orgasm? Like these were things, and they were a little bit like, oh, okay, we can't say that. And the blog started by me just sort of trying to put words on a page, trying to sort of give some sort of shape to these feelings and these ideas that I'd always carried. And the blog, I sort of shared it with a few people and got a few responses. And weirdly, the journey of Soul Sutras is a very personal journey. Like I worked in advertising and marketing for 20 years, and it was kind of getting to a point where I'm like, but how does it serve humanity? Like, how does it serve anybody else apart from buying more shit we don't need?
Mm.
And it was kind of my journey. And I had like quite a big mental health crisis as well at that point. And it just kind of drew out of me, and I think made me brave enough to sort of say things that before that perhaps I wasn't. So then I started running Masala Monologues as workshops, and South Asian women came, and kind of, it was incredible. We'd sit in these rooms. I think I had about 20 workshops over that year. We'd sit in these rooms and we'd tell each other this really deeply personal, painful stuff. And we'd connect and we'd talk and we'd say, oh, that happened to me too. And this particular thing happened to me. And there was a real sense of connection. And that's when I knew, like, I was like, okay, this is kind of what I want to do. And that from there went on to collecting stories from a lot of women. I did 2 theatre shows. One was at Richmond, one was at the Design Museum as part of a festival, taking South Asian women's stories, putting them into like a narrative structure and presenting them to an audience. That was fantastic feedback, really, really amazing. Like loads of women come up to
Yeah.
me, hug me and say, my God, you're saying things I've
That's our
always
story.
thought about. Yeah, you're telling our stories. And from there came the podcast, which was completely accidental. I'm like in marketing, I'm not an audio expert. And from going from
If you love a chat,
yeah,
you need a podcast.
you know what it's like. So the journey was from kind of going on to Google to say, what is a podcast, to
Yeah.
actually creating my own. So that's kind of the journey for Soul
And
Sutras.
what on the stories, like when you collect the stories and when you first started in the workshops and probably now, what are the main themes that the biggest sort of taboos and the main stories that you see when it comes to South Asian women and sexuality? What's the big ones?
So there are sort of so many taboos within our culture. So there's everything from sex to periods to menopause to mental health to having babies to not having babies. There's just everything. But within the space of kind of sexuality, particularly female sexuality, because female sexuality doesn't exist as a concept in our culture, that's a massive taboo. So sex is for men, is what we're told, that you get married and then the man you marry will have sex with you. It's nothing to do. There is no volition. There is no drive for us to say, hey, this is my body and this is my orgasm or pleasure or whatever you want to call it. So that is a huge problem. So because when you don't grow up accepting pleasure as something that belongs to you, that's a huge problem. To go to a place where you seek pleasure or you ask for pleasure or you think about your pleasure, it's a huge journey. I always say this, and kind of other places have said this, where if you come from a culture where female pleasure doesn't exist, buying a vibrator is a revolutionary act,
Yeah.
or saying, my body is capable of an orgasm is, it's just unthinkable. So that's, I think, a huge, huge, huge taboo, and something that I'm trying very hard to kind of change.
Yeah, because it's bad. I mean, it's bad enough for us, us white folk. I'm on the and with women and growing up, and we have that messaging. So I can't even imagine, to us, you have the messaging that sex is the man, penis in the vagina, the end point's coming, and it's all about the man. It's bad enough for us, but actually, it's even more extreme. In that basically, that vagina belongs to your husband, and it's just a hole for him. And that's it. So,
Exactly. And
yeah.
there's like countless kind of films and songs and Bollywood that we've all grown up with. Like I have never, I mean, until recently, there's some very good work being done by South Asian feminists on Netflix and things like that. But growing up, it was always like the man is the aggressor, the woman is like the coy one, and she's sort of like, oh no, not now, whatever. I've never ever in all my years growing up ever seen a woman saying, you know what, I really like this man, or woman, whatever. But that just never happens. And what strikes me particularly as this being wrong, because if you go back to the times of the Kama Sutra, 400 BC, right? Or there's other books called the Anangaranga, which is similar. There is a huge focus on female pleasure. There are like pages about on a certain cycle of the moon, a woman's left thigh is very sensitive. Things like that. It's very specific.
But it's
And
true though, the whole moon side of things is
yes,
massive.
exactly.
Yeah, hugely
Yes, and we
effective.
know
Yeah.
this from how our bodies are and how they respond to pleasure at different times in our lives. But so there, within the books, within the Kama Sutra, within the Ananga, women are seeking pleasure. Women have lovers, men have lovers. They have trysts, they are married, and then they still take lovers. There's all of this going on in 400 BC. There are, like it's beautiful and quite shocking when you sort of read some of it. There are things like if you have a married lover, you make sure that he leaves you a love bite under your, I don't know, left breast or something, so your husband doesn't see it. This is this is 400 BC. We were doing this in 400 BC,
Yeah.
and
What
then
do you think's happened though? What,
so
I
I
know,
feel
I mean,
like
religion has a lot to do with it in
religion,
England, in the Western
yeah.
world, but in South Asian, do you think it's similar?
I think it's a more societal norms. I think because I don't think Hinduism particularly says that sex is bad anywhere. I mean, what's happening now is a whole other conversation. But um, the religion maybe to a degree, but the British, the colonial kind of influence was quite a big one. Because I think Victorian morality, when it came into
Mm,
India in the 1800s, like they didn't know what to make of our ways, I think. So Kerala, which is where I'm from, my family from Kerala, the women never wore blouses. So there was like a sari and the scarf went over your breast like this. So your breasts were not covered. The British at that point sort of had some sort of rule that they introduced saying the women have to cover their tops up, you know.
Honestly, bloody
So,
British. Do you know, the Church of England, has a lot to answer for.
so that's one part of it. It isn't just the British. I mean, there's a whole time called Manu who introduced all these scriptures and structures to say women belong to men and property and caste system. So there's a whole lot of it's very complicated. I don't think there's a simple answer.
Mm,
But
just
the important point is that South Asian culture isn't this. South Asian culture isn't about repression. South Asian culture is about female pleasure and male pleasure and people getting together and enjoying sex. That's our culture.
And what do you so launching what with Soul Sutras? Have you seen a change? And what are the main things your advice and how women, because if you don't learn that
Yeah,
you're allowed to have you're allowed to have pleasure,
yeah,
then how do you learn it as an adult? How do you reprogram to not have that shame and that guilt and
yeah,
to
yeah,
know
yeah.
that you're allowed to do it?
I think forums like Soul Sutras, and there are other women doing amazing work, talking about the fact that sexual pleasure is a right. We all have it. Like it's our bodies, and they are wonderful, incredible kind of machines of like the things we feel are incredible, and that is ours. It doesn't belong to anybody else. So I think to remove stigma and taboo and shame, which is a hugely, as we all know, shame is like the oldest and the deepest kind of shackle that keeps us in
Mm,
place, to remove all of that and to access what we always have always had. So I think normalizing conversations like this, or having conversations like this, seeing other South Asian women stand up and say, you know what, I love sex, I love pleasure, these are the things that are part of my culture and my identity, I think is the first step, because other people then see you and say, oh, okay, she's South Asian, she's saying these things, must be okay. So I think that's part of the conversations. Then going on social media, I think engaging with people, doing a podcast is a big one. I think because people can hear other women, inspiring women, talk about the things they're doing. So I think it's a very slow process. Um, I recently did like a survey about sex toys in South Asian women. I was just really interested to see how we as South Asian women were buying sex toys and what our relationship was like. How do we think about it? And it was quite surprising, or actually not surprising. There's a lot of guilt and shame attached to it, to the whole process of buying a sex toy, storing a sex toy. Like, there are women who've said they put it in the backs of bin bags and the back of the closet. Some women are talking about hiding it in their cars, like that, the boot of the car.
yeah.
Um, So there's a lot of that. But what is also to me really heartening within that survey is descriptions, because I've asked like how do you feel about it, and they're like, it's amazing, this is mine, this is all mine, and it's got nothing to do with either my parents or my boyfriend or my husband or any of these things. So I think, in answer to your question, first, starting conversations, first, saying these things openly and saying, this is what this is, and this is lovely and wonderful, and nothing shameful about it. And the more we hear other South Asian women talk, and particularly in forums like yours, I think, and other kind of more mainstream forums in the UK, when we see ourselves represented, when we hear voices and accents that sound like ours,
Yeah.
saying these things, they are very powerful, I think, in
Yeah,
changing things we believe.
you're not some weirdo.
Yeah, yeah,
On that.
yeah, yeah,
But also, what would you say on the, because one of the big barriers, that South Asian women have, and we have for a certain bit, but not as bad at all, is getting men in the conversation.
yeah,
Because that's the thing; it's all very well
yeah,
going, well, I have the right. The World Health
yeah,
Organization has said
yeah,
that
yeah,
sexual
yeah,
pleasure is a basic human right. It's all very well us as women going, well, we are allowed it and we want to do this. But
yeah,
when
yeah,
you've got a culture where even the men have been messaged that
yeah,
it's all about them and their
yeah,
wives or their
yeah,
possessions, how do you, yeah, what's been your experience? Because you've probably had abuse doing what you do on
I
that
did.
level.
Yeah.
And yeah, what's your advice on that side of things?
I think I feel like things are changing, and there is a shift, very subtle, but it's happening. Because you see, this kind of patriarchal structure that we've lived in damages men as much as women. Like, it's easier if you're a South Asian man than you're a woman. But even then, there are places where no South Asian man really is given the space to say, I'm feeling vulnerable, I'm feeling emotion, I've lost a parent or a child, or I'm having emotional issues, I've got mental health issues. That if you don't allow people to be really true, it really damages them. So I feel like there is a shift. It's very, very slow, I think, because it's just so kind of entrenched in our culture, I think. So I'd say the majority of men still will say, "Oh my God, this is our place and that's your place," and like parents and granddads, that's kind of how it is. But I feel like there is a shift happening with younger men who
Mm,
see that this damages them and it damages the women in their lives. So I feel like when you start conversations and you say that, look inside yourself, is this really how you want to live as well? Like, would you not want a, I don't know, amazing sexual experience with your partner? Do you not want to kind of have that? Do you not want the space to say, I'm having a emotionally rough day today or this month or whatever, or I feel this pain and I don't know what to do with it? So I think when you say those things to men, you sort of are able to kind of open the conversation a little bit. It's a long
yeah.
way. I don't think we're anywhere near where we should be, but I feel like things are changing. I want to believe things are changing.
Yeah,
I'm
no, they are
very
changing.
positive.
Do you think the whole integration of, society being a bit more, especially living in the UK like you do, that if you integrate all the nationalities and the culture, like I grew up abroad and we moved every 2 years, and I've always been a big human person, you
Yeah,
know what I mean? It's
yeah,
surrounded by all nationalities in the
yeah,
Middle East, and
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't see that kind of little niche type
yeah.
communities of only that sort of person. And do you think there's a change in the UK of that? And if you, when you open up the echo chamber to the other cultures and nationalities and religions, that helps change that narrative.
I think it does. I think living in the UK in this very multicultural, multi-language, multi-experience society definitely, definitely helps, I think. And I've lived in other places, and I think what we have here is incredible. I've never seen this kind of mixing and this kind of acceptance of all kind of faiths, and I think it's wonderful. So that's good. But however, I think within communities there is, it's complicated. I think as human beings we need to feel like we belong to a community and a culture,
Yeah,
and sometimes when we ascribe certain value systems to that community, that becomes part of our identity. So it's a
yeah,
little trickier, I think, because if you're like, okay, so I'm Indian, so what does that mean? It means I follow these kind of systems and I do this for Diwali. and I don't really talk about sex. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Well, that's how
it's
religion's done it,
complicated.
isn't it? Yeah, they have
Exactly.
rules and you're answerable to
Exactly.
those rules so that when you then break the rules, you can repent and apologize and and that's the thing. People like having those
Yeah.
and it's making that, isn't it? It's going, well, those rules are
Yeah.
bollocks.
Yeah.
They're trying to like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And
Um,
also saying that actually those rules are not our culture.
mm,
This is our culture. Like that's why I like to talk about the Kama Sutra, and I like because that's our culture too. So within every culture, I think we've got to have the opportunity to say, does this serve us? Yes, it served us a couple of 100 years ago. How does it serve us now, where we are now, in the world that we live in now? So I think it's complicated. I wish there was a simple answer. I think it definitely helps to live in a multicultural society massively, because then you see other ways of being.
mm.
But I still think there are issues within the pockets of communities which we need to kind of fix ourselves,
Yeah.
I think,
And
and challenge.
what's the taboos within the culture around periods and menopause and any kind of
Yeah,
hormonal side of
yeah.
things? What goes
Um,
on?
so within, again, there's no basis for this in either Hindu scriptures or anything that I know of, but traditionally, like in traditional families, girls are not allowed to enter the kitchen. Girls aren't allowed to go to the temple. Even this day and age, I did an episode on season 1 for Masala Podcast where girls have talked about, they can't go to a wedding or a party because they're on their period. So the perception is that periods is equal to dirty.
Yeah.
Periods is equal to being hidden away. And this is how I grew up. I mean, I had my period when I was about 12 or 13. And I remember being put into another room. Like I was told I had to stay in that room. I couldn't come out of the room. My meals were given to me in that room.
Wow.
And I was like, and I didn't understand. I was a really naive 12-year-old. Like, and I was like, what? And I felt this, I remember still this feeling of shame in my body. Like my body was doing something that was dirty and I didn't understand it. It must be dirty for them to segregate me. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the kind of um, message that I received, I think. So that
Yeah.
unfortunately in 2020 still happens. Not everywhere, but it does in some South Asian families here in the UK. So menstruation, so anything to do with the female body is hidden, is taboo. So
Mm.
whether that's sex, whether that's pleasure, whether that's periods, whether that's menopause, they are not spoken about. And when you don't speak about something, it becomes really dangerous.
Yeah, because it
It's
becomes
like,
a
oh,
thing
it's
and it
like this
becomes
thing we
a
don't speak about.
mm,
Um, so there are, unfortunately, I think a lot of taboos within kind of hormonal things that happen within the female body in the culture.
but when you
And
look at
again,
it, it's kind of when you're talking then, it's just so obvious a kind of a control thing, isn't it? Of controlling the hormonal, hysterical female, and because we
exactly.
can't, we mustn't be
Oh, you're
tempted.
so weak. You must be put
Exactly,
in this
cover the
separate room.
bodies.
Cover
We
the
can't
body.
control ourselves, so dumping them. So yeah,
Let's do all these crazy things. We must manage you. We must keep you in this space because, I mean, God forbid, we suddenly say, oh my God, my body is bloody powerful. It can do all these amazing things and it can have, it can have periods and it can have orgasms and it can pop out babies. It's like this
mm,
amazing, powerful machine that we carry within us. I mean, the world would kind of collapse, wouldn't
yeah.
it?
We're just total temptresses. That's what we are.
Yeah, we are.
We should just walk around in bin bags, and never, never come out.
Never come out.
Going to the hair part because
Yeah,
that's like in Western culture there is this thing of like just being completely hair free and
yeah,
any kind of hair is just disgusting
yeah,
and it's just sort of and like that photo that we had taken down on our Instagram. I remember actually we were saying this is amazing and this one girl came and went, that's disgusting, and you just go, you're a girl.
yeah.
Well, my boyfriend men like no hair, and we're like, well, the fact that all you care about is what a man likes, kind of says
Yeah,
it all, and I feel a little bit
yeah,
sorry for
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, because it is, because actually a lot of Asian women are hairy, and it's
Yeah,
just,
we
it's just
have
how
a
it
lot of
is.
hair. We've got hair on our heads, hair in our pubes, hair in our legs. It's just, we are just genetically, we've got more hair. But again, the shaming. is this kind of control thing, I think. I remember again when I was in school, I think 13 or 14, I had really hairy legs, and I still do. Now I'm like, okay, this is me, deal with it. But at that point, I remember other girls and women put other women down as well,
Oh,
sort of
women are
shaming me quite a
bitches,
lot.
honestly.
They're terrible. It's like, oh my God, this is awful. Like, oh my God, look at her hairy legs, things like that. So again, traditionally, there is no space for that. Women were what they were. But I think the kind of modern um, ideas of beauty, which what come from porn,
Yeah, and
where does
men.
the idea of and men,
Yeah.
yeah, hairless bodies, hairless pussies, hairless everything,
Mm.
it comes from porn. And to a degree where hair, which is normal, is now a fetish. I mean, that just makes me so angry. It's like, so you've taken what we've always been and made us all be hairless and then turned us into a fetish. It's
Yeah,
just, it
exactly.
just
Yeah, if
makes me
you're,
so
but I mean, to
angry.
be honest, I think this year has been the year of the bush when it comes to
Yeah.
lockdown. You know what I mean? There's
We should
a lot of
all
husbands
rock the
out there.
bush.
Yeah, a lot of
We
partners
should
going,
all.
okay.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Partners rocking bushes. And it's like, here we go. This is what we are in our, glory. And naturally, you know, um, I don't know if you've come across this, like particularly with my younger friends. I've had female identifying friends say that they'd never have sex with someone if they had hair. I don't know if you've ever come across this.
They
It's
Yeah, I've had it. I've come across it saying that they like them bald, like
yeah,
total Hollywood, and
yeah,
it's kind of
yeah,
I've tried it a couple of times, but I'm like, to me it just feels a little bit paedophile-esque of like, especially now I've got two
exactly.
daughters. I've got a 2-year-old and a
Yeah,
4-year-old,
yeah,
and I'm like, that's kind of no, that's sort of wrong actually to not
exactly,
have any hair there because it just
exactly.
is a little bit childlike.
Exactly.
um,
It's like a girl, isn't it? And
yeah.
what as a grown woman, a full pubic bush,
Yeah.
it's
Plus, to be honest, when you try and pee with no hair, it just goes
no,
everywhere.
yeah,
It's not
and
practical.
no, and doesn't it chafe like the 3-day growth? I mean, I did that once, and it's like, oh my God, what is that? It really hurts.
Yeah, they were my pre-baby days of let's, try
Yeah,
and get it all.
yeah,
Now I'm like,
yeah,
whatever, fuck it.
yeah. Excuse me.
Exactly. Exactly. And and nipple hair as well, because that's one
Yes,
thing, that's something
yes.
you guys cover, isn't it? The whole.
I do, I do. Again, because I have nipple hair, and I've always been like in my younger days, I'd be like really embarrassed about it, and now I'm like, okay, this is me. I have breasts and
Mm.
I have nipple hair, and a lot of Asian women do. I think a lot of I don't know how many what
A
percentage
lot of
of this.
Western women, I've got polycystic ovaries, so my hormones are all over the place, and I know when it's a bit more testosterone because I'm like, oh look
Yeah,
at the hairs. So yeah,
and again, it's like this shaming thing. Like somehow the perception is that we are all, naturally hairless and glowing and, all of these things, none of which are true. That's not what we look like. We've got hair. It's what the grown adult female body is. So even talking about it feels like, oh my God, nipple hair. Oh my God, I can't believe she just said nipple hair. It's just, do you see? It's just by making these things taboo and shameful and shaming other people for being like that is what we damage ourselves. So I want to talk about it just because it's a thing. And I'm like,
it's a
why is it
thing,
a
and most girls I know, no matter what color of skin,
yeah,
get nipple
yeah,
hairs.
yeah.
Yeah, or I get the odd one that just comes out of here, and I'm like, I find it the next morning, it's 2 inches. I'm like, how did I not see it when it was 1 inch? How did I
It's
miss
great.
that? How is it now 2 inches? That, you know what I mean? We just are just, but do you know what? Real men and real, people, secure people just don't care. You know what I
This
mean?
is
They
what
just
I
take
found.
you as you are.
This is what I
And if
found.
anyone doesn't, then sort of
That that's not the right person for you. Like I really
exactly.
believe like whoever you're with should be like, oh my God, I'm so privileged to be with this person.
Mm,
And they are beautiful as they are, I think, is what the reaction should be. Anybody shames you for not being like that, I think get rid of them. Really.
yeah. Sometimes I
They
do
don't do
stuff and it's disgusting, and my husband's just like, you just gross me out. I'm like, I gross myself out a lot of the time, to be honest. But he still loves me. But
Yeah.
just finally, tell us about the Masala workshops, the different
Yeah.
workshops, and are
Yeah.
you doing them at the moment, the virtual ones, or?
I've done one of them a couple of months ago, and I wasn't sure because the whole Masala Monologues workshop is very much about intimacy and sharing and women feeling safe, South Asian women feeling safe. So I was a bit nervous to take them online. But having done the first one online, it was incredible. I mean, we did exactly, there's that feeling that and this sounds a bit bonkers, it's like a feeling I get, and everybody's connected and everybody's in that room and really gets everybody else. And you can see that moment where people sort of are first hesitant and then they really open up, and then other people step in and support them, and it's wonderful. So the hope is, and I'm planning kind of a couple of workshops in the coming year, hopefully Jan, Feb, March, one each online, because that's kind of what we're all doing.
Yeah.
Uh, and I hope to have Masala Monologues workshops online. And then I do want to do another theatre show when we are able to. I finished season 2 of Masala Podcast. I'm recording season 3 now.
Cool.
Again, more taboos, more
just flying. Just keep, that's the thing, you just got to keep, as you said, you just got to keep talking about sex, and the more you talk about it and the more other women start talking about it, the more it comes as easy as talking about your latest diet and fitness regime.
Yeah,
really,
exactly.
That's how it needs to be. But thank you so much for chatting. It's been awesome. And
I'm going to take a quick picture of you. Can I try and do this without? Thank you so much. I can't tell you what a fan I am. I'm like, I love seeing it. Everything you
well, do you know what? As soon as we're back, I'll be sat in the corner crying my eyes out with a big bottle of wine and a couple of straws. But come along, yeah. As soon as we're the first one open, come along, and then.
Cool. It will be my live stream.
All right, cool. I will.
Thanks so much.
Nice to see you.
Thanks
Bye.
for having me. Take care. Bye.